Imagine a movie studio reluctantly releasing a film it doesn't believe in, made cheaply during one of the worst economic downturns in history, starring an actor nobody wants. Sounds like a recipe for disaster, right? Well, surprise! That is actually the story behind Dracula, the 1931 Universal masterpiece that launched a genre. I'm Antonia Carlotta. This is Universally Me, the channel for all things Universal and classic horror. My family started Universal Studios. They made the Universal monster movies, including Dracula. And I'm here to tell you how this little film beat the odds to become legendary. It's 1930. The Great Depression is devastating Hollywood. Ticket sales are plunging, studios are panicking, and Universal Studios, run by my great uncle Carl Laemmle, is desperately trying to figure out how to keep the lights on. Now, horror movies were far from box office guarantees. In fact, quite the opposite. Generally speaking, Uncle Carl wanted to make movies at Universal with the widest audience possible, hence the name Universal. Horror would alienate huge swaths of the audience right away. Now, Universal had made some horror films before, or like horror style films before, but they always had very earthly explanations to them, right? Like the Phantom of the Opera or The Cat and the Canary. You have a man in a costume or somebody scheming to cause trouble. And most of their horror films were balanced with a good amount of comedy to keep things light. But now it's 1931 and Universal is about to make a real chills and thrills shocker movie where audiences are just supposed to accept that the man on screen is actually a vampire. Honestly, Uncle Carl thought that it was risky and a little bit silly. So why were they even going down this path? The answer lies with his son, Junior Laemmle. Junior had recently taken over as head of production at Universal, essentially a very generous 21st birthday present. Junior was young, ambitious. He'd been working in the industry since he was a little kid. He knew the industry inside and out, and he had big plans for Universal. Junior was deeply intrigued by darker stories. He loved the macabre. He pushed hard for Dracula. He was so sure it was going to resonate with audiences the same way it did with him. His dad was less sure, but eventually begrudgingly agreed and gave the film a meager budget of about $300,000. For comparison, The Hunchback of Notre Dame almost a decade earlier had a budget over $1 million. The Phantom of the Opera in 1925 had a budget just over $600,000, and All Quiet on the Western Front from the year before had a budget over $1 million. So it really might have felt like Dracula was fighting a losing battle, but at least they got the green light. Now, the film industry itself was going through a major transformation. The silent era was making way for sound film, and Universal was still figuring out what that looked like. Not every theater was outfitted for sound, and to incorporate a score into Dracula, that was going to take time and be costly. When Dracula premiered, it had no score at all. It opens with Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake, which was used more than a few times in Universal horror films. And other than a few small snippets of classical songs like that kind of fit in the scenes, there's no music at all. I will say, I think some people might see this as a lack or a little strange, but my opinion, I kind of love it. I think that it ultimately ends up building the atmosphere up really well. There's a lot more tension. These big quiet moments that are only broken with like a sudden sound or eerie dialogue. I think it's part of what makes the film so iconic. And of course, we have to talk about the casting. Bela Lugosi today is synonymous with Dracula, but he was not Universal's first, second, third, or even fourth pick. I think every actor in Hollywood auditioned before Bela Lugosi got the role. They wanted Lon Chaney, also known as the Man of a Thousand Faces, to star in Dracula. He had previously done Phantom of the Opera and The Hunchback of Notre Dame for Universal, but tragically, he passed away before he had the chance to make Dracula. Bela Lugosi starred in the stage version of Dracula. You think he would be a shoo-in for the role, but he had to practically beg for the part. And even when he finally got the role, he had to accept a salary of only $500 a week, which even back then was really low. Of course, today, It's impossible to imagine Dracula any other way. The entire Dracula shoot was a bit disorganized, not what you might expect of a smash hit. Todd Browning, the director, for some reason or another was a little bit absent, leaving Carl Freund to take on a lot of the directing work. Though Bela Lugosi was dying to be in the film, his co-stars David Manners and Helen Chandler were less enthused. They had a hard time taking it seriously. Helen was also suffering from appendicitis during filming and counting the days until they wrapped so she could get proper medical attention. Released on Valentine's Day in 1931, Dracula didn't just do well, it took the world by storm. Audiences desperate for an escape from the harsh realities of the Depression flocked to see this movie. They were enthralled, fascinated, horrified. They had never seen or heard anything like it. Now, critics were mixed, but the public adored it. And it was not just a film, it was an event. As much as Dracula was an escape, I think it was also a source of connection. Maybe Dracula represents the Depression itself, draining people of their life. Or at a time, actually just like today, where immigration was such a hot button issue, you have this lead who looks a little different, who speaks with an accent. I think these sources of connection are what turned Dracula from being a flash in the pan to an everlasting icon. Without the success of Dracula, I am almost positive that Junior wouldn't have been able to make Frankenstein less than a year later. And it was really that back-to-back success of Dracula and Frankenstein that launched the Universal Monsters and launched horror as a genre. Like, even the other studios were jumping on the horror train after they saw what Universal did. But that means that without Dracula, you could say goodbye to The Mummy, The Invisible Man, The Bride of Frankenstein, The Werewolf of London, The Raven, The Black Cat, all those Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff mashup movies. And from the other studios, you could say goodbye to Freaks and White Zombie and King Kong and House of Wax. None of that would exist if not for Dracula. Imagine, too, if like the Hays Code censorship, if that got established and found its footing before horror had a chance to get established and find its footing. Think of how many decades we would have had to wait for this entire genre of movies that we love so much. Dracula, the little movie that was almost shelved, became the cornerstone of Hollywood horror, opening the door for countless others and changing cinema forever. It really goes to show you that sometimes the biggest risks make the best movies. In the comments, I want to hear from you your favorite story of a movie beating the odds, whatever that means to you. And don't forget, if you support my work with a paid membership on YouTube, you get bonus content, videos, pictures, podcasts, more. Honestly, if you have a paid membership, you can ask me for what you want and I will deliver. Thank you guys so much for watching. Oh, and if you like these old Hollywood deep dives, classic horror deep dives, don't forget to hit the subscribe, the like, the notification thing. Anything you can find to click around here, just do it. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.